Do the Royals have to move one of their starting pitchers to get the bat they want? I'll give you my opinion next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned in to another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That is at JOHNYJ_15. And you can listen to us on wherever you download your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. For you first-time listeners wondering what to expect episode-wise per week, we bring you episodes 5 days a week, even during the off-season. Only for about a month in January, or I should say a couple weeks in January, do we drop down to 3 episodes a week. But that won't last that long because spring training's right around the corner, which is when we bump back up to 5 episodes a week. Before we get started, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. We continue our discussions of off-season targets, trade targets, free agent targets for the Royals, though for today's episode, it's not so much about a specific target, right? You've seen some of our episodes of we feel this guy would be a good fit or this trade partner would be a really good fit for the Royals. And that will be kind of a discussion point today, but this is more so a broad topic, which I feel is pretty necessary to kind of kick off those legitimate trade discussions. And every day or so, I try to go look back at SpoTrack or SpotTrack, whatever you want to call it, check out the free agent list. And if somebody has, maybe piqued my interest, if a player has slowly started to win me over, if the Royals should spend money and get that player. But every time I do that, I also need to keep an open mind that, the Royals could look at some of these options and not be willing to meet those asking prices. And that doesn't have to be the cream of the crop, right? If you go approach Cody Bellinger and he says, I want this, and you say no, that's one thing. But it could be something like a Trent Grisham where you go ask about his availability, what he's looking for, and he's way above what you're willing to meet. And so the trade part of it becomes increasingly likely. And JJ McCall, as you've heard me say so many times before, he is just more of a transactional GM through the trade route. If he's going to sign some players, I did an episode earlier this week. I believe the Royals will bring back Adam Frazier and Mike Yastrzemski, but their big addition, if you talk about a percentage-wise, what's the likelihood of the Royals going the free agent route or the trade route? I'm starting to believe it's 65 to 70% trade route than it would be free agency. And I believe that says more about the market than it does about the players they would be going after. The reason I see them going the trade route is they have more leverage that way than they do with these free agents. The Royals are never going to be that team that throws their weight around with the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Mets and the Phillies. They are not going to be in competition for Kyle Tucker. Very unlikely they're in competition for Alex Bregman or Cody Bellinger. Yes, I remember the report that the Royals could be a sleeper team. Starting to look more like that was a plant from Scott Boras, who probably wants the Tigers to pony up and give Bregman that type of money. So if the Royals go the trade route, here's why they have leverage. They have an abundance of pitching. And this morning when I was thinking about this specific topic, this episode, I went through the rankings ERA-wise for pitching last year. And there were a lot of teams that had mediocre pitching that got to October. Their offense was their bread and butter. They could drive in 5 to 6 runs a night and just get mediocre pitching. But those teams probably don't want to have that same recipe next year because unless you win the World Series, which at this point it's either Toronto or the Dodgers, you're going to be looking for ways to upgrade your team. And pitching is going to be where a lot of those teams want to upgrade. The Royals have it, and the Royals have depth. And if they want to get that game-changing bat, if they want to get the middle-of-the-order bat that's eluded them, I know I sound like a broken record, but I have to hammer the point in. They have to trade one of those starters. And that might be the first time that I've said they have to, But if you want a difference maker, if you want someone that can really change your lineup, that can lengthen the lineup, you're going to have to part ways with one of these arms. And there are two options in this rotation that I believe could get you that middle of the order bat, that corner outfield bat. Now, who that would be, I'm not sure just yet, which I already teased at the beginning of this episode. No, I don't know who is actively shopping certain outfielders just yet. We will know the closer we get to the middle of November and the early portions of December, which teams are trying to shop some of their players. But if you're the Royals, there's two guys in the rotation that make the most sense. You have Kris Bubic, who's entering the final year of arbitration, but coming off of an all-star year, also a year that was derailed by injury in the second half. So Kris Bubic is a name you could shop around because there's that final year of arbitration where he's soon to be a free agent. That also can drive his price down when trying to shop him out there because teams are going to go, he's got an injury past. He's had Tommy John. He had the rotator cuff strain, and we don't really know if he's a starter or a reliever. The second option will be Noah Cameron. And I know it's not going to be very popular, but there are reasons to believe, if you want to be more pessimistic, that Noah Cameron could have a lesser year than he did in 2024 or 2025, excuse me. Because Noah Cameron is not going to light it up on the radar gun. He relies on command. He has good stuff. I wouldn't say elite stuff. I believe Kris Bubic has elite stuff. And if he gives you 170 to 180 innings, he can be your second or third best pitcher in the rotation. And for some teams out there, he can be your ace. Will Noah Cameron ever be an ace? I would say it's unlikely, but that's where I bring up to you listeners out there. If Noah Cameron was being shopped because of the years of control, he's coming off the year that he did, and you could get a middle of the order bat, an outfielder that also has multiple years of control, because I don't see JJ Picollo trading any of those guys unless they are getting a young, controllable bat that can be a big-time difference maker. If you want that bat, it's not going to be by trading Ryan Bergert or Stephen Kolek. They play into this because as of right now, they don't have a spot in the rotation. And the more I've thought about it, the unlikelier I think it is that they're just relievers. They're long relievers or you keep them stashed in Omaha. You traded for those guys for a reason. Yes, to get depth on a team that was competing for the postseason, but know that going into the offseason, you had options. You had multiple guys that could take a spot in the rotation, and you could shop the others. You know, teams are not going to give you that controllable bat for Seth Lugo or Michael Wacha. Not with what they're making, not at their age. The Royals are not going to trade Cole Reagans, in my opinion, because they still view him as the ace. They are not going to give up much for Alec Marsh or Bailey Falter. Those are the seventh and eighth guys I would probably put as the starters, or maybe the ninth and 10th, if you will, because I know that Bergert and Kolek are number 6 and number 7 for the rotation. You want to have pitching. You want everybody to be there, and you want them all to be great. The reality is that's not going to happen. The reality is you need a bat. You need offensive help more than you need starting pitching depth. And the moves for Bergert and Kolek allow you to be more flexible there. And with the way the market is, free agent-wise, the trade route is going to be likelier. And the Royals can't make that big splash unless one of those guys go. And the Royals probably already have in their mind who they believe can generate more trade interest, but also who might be better for them long-term. And yeah, the easy answer may be it's Noah Cameron. Noah Cameron is coming off a phenomenal rookie season. You know, he very well could be a multiple-time All-Star. We like the upside of what he has, but we are so soon to forget how good Kris Bubic was before he started to go downhill with the rotator cuff strain. I believe the only thing standing in the way of Kris Bubic from being an All-Star every single year is the injury concerns. If he's healthy, and it's a big if, right? Because that's a part of your talent, durability. If you're a durable pitcher, you have unbelievable value. If you're a 180 to 200 inning guy every single year, then I'm going to put a lot of faith into you. I'm going to pay you that type of money because I can count on 30 starts a year. With Noah Cameron, as much as we would love to fall in love with it, he's only done it once. And you kind of go back to that ideology of when you trade prospects, right? If you have a 7th or 8th round pick that you turn into a stud, right? He's a top 100 guy. He's top 15 in your system, and you trade him away. And people go, oh my gosh, I can't believe they would trade away this guy. I loved him as a prospect. You do that because you believe you can do it again. You believe that you can find another one of them. And so that's where it comes down to Bubic and Cameron for me. Can you find another Chris Bubic? Can you find another Noah Cameron? And if you can, and maybe they don't have to be lefties, right? They can just be a starter that gives similar production. Is that Bergert or Kolek? They probably need to pick one or the other too. And I certainly would like to see Bergert make a lot of starts next year. Same with Stephen Kolek, which means one of these guys has to be leveraged in a trade to get that bat that has been so elusive over the last couple years. What do you think about trading one of the guys in the rotation for that premier middle of the order bat? Let us know in the YouTube comments below. Coming up next, we're going to talk about which teams the Royals should target if they try to move one of those pitchers. That's coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can listen to us on wherever you download your podcast. Want to tell you about the first sponsor today in PrizePicks. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineup. That's right, $50 in lineups after you play that first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB, for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it is good to be right. Let's keep our conversation going about a potential trade for the Royals. And though I'm not going to give you specific outfielders, I'm not going to give you the most available guys. We have all of the offseason to go through that. This is more so about the teams they should target. And I recall doing an episode a few weeks back about the Angels being a trade destination, about the Red Sox being a team you can negotiate with a little bit. And I certainly will keep them in mind here. But also when it comes to trading away talented guys on your team, right? Starters. You want to be careful about who you're negotiating with, not just because you see those teams, right? Because if you trade with somebody in the American League, you are actively competing against them for a playoff spot. You certainly don't want to trade in division to a team like Cleveland or to a team like Detroit who could use the pitching, who could use pitching depth, and then you got to face them over 10 times a year. That seems like, bad negotiating. At the same time, and in that same conversation, you can't turn down a great offer just because of who the call is coming from. I felt that way in the NFL for years, certainly being in Kansas City and where I work, we cover the Chiefs daily. And it was that, teams didn't want to negotiate with the Chiefs because you don't want to help them get back to the Super Bowl. For the Royals, it's obviously different, right? They aren't going to the World Series for the 5th time in 6 years or the 6th time in 7 years. They are a team that is trying to get to the postseason every single year. So if you are to trade away a Noah Cameron or a Chris Bubic, who makes the most sense and who actually could give you an offer that might blow you away, that you just simply can't turn down? Because if you had to ask JJ Picollo and company right now, I'd imagine they say something like, yeah, these guys are going to be in spring training. They're going to be fighting for a spot in their rotation. We love the competition because you want to keep talking them up. We feel that all of these guys can start games for us next year, and we're not looking to move any of our pitching. But if you have someone like Boston call, and Boston, who fell short in the American League wildcard series to the Yankees, their bitter division rival. And why did they fall short? Well, in Game 3, they had to throw a rookie who had less than 30 innings to his name. Good stuff. And I was largely impressed in watching that game. But the Red Sox likely know with the offense they have, the young talent they have, they need to shore up their rotation. Now, Lucas Giolito wasn't healthy, and he probably could have made a big impact in that series if he was ready to go. But that also leads me back to the point about depth. You don't want to get to October and you are scratching and clawing to get through a 3-game series. I mean, we don't even talk about a 5-game series or a 7-game series. If you're struggling to get through 3 games to win it, 2 out of 3, then you have starting pitching depth. And the Royals have to be seen as that team that have that depth. Now, this goes back to my original point. Boston is a team that you need to be competing with to grab one of those spots for October. So if you trade away Noah Cameron and he shoves it every time he faces you, he just takes the ball and does what old Rick Vaughn said he was going to do when he thought that he was cut. If he does that to you every time you face him, well, you better hope that you got a good outfielder in return. But Boston is that perfect pairing too, because they have multiple outfielders that if they were offered to the Royals, I'm not really sure you could turn it down. And we also had that as a topic in one of our episodes not too long ago. I know I refer back to old episodes and I'm doing it on the fly here, but if Boston, who knows they have Cedar Rafaela, they've got Roman Anthony, they've got Jarren Duran, they've got Wilyer Abreu, they've got Masataka Yoshida, they've got 5 outfielders that all would be starters in Kansas City. So if the Royals said, we kind of have a similar situation, but with our rotation, we have valuable starters, guys with years of control that we don't want just wasting away in a long relief role out of the bullpen. And if they can get us that outfielder, well, let's see what we can work out here. If Boston says we love what Noah Cameron did and we feel he can get better and he's got the years of control, well, now that might be enough for us to give you Jarren Duran. Or maybe there'll be more players included. There'll be more money included. I'm just spitballing here. Or Wilyer Abreu is one of those names. Only guy I would say no to in a deal like that is probably Masataka Yoshida because he's not much of an outfielder. He's really a DH only coming off a down year. The second team, I'll move through this one rather quickly. I feel the Angels will always be that team that you should be open-minded to. They have been tough to negotiate with over the last handful of years, but they have 2 outfielders that would drastically change the middle of the order with Taylor Ward and, of course, Joe Adell. 2 guys that were above average hitters. Joe Adell coming off a career year, multiple years of control, and 35 home runs in the middle of your order. Why wouldn't you take that? Same goes for Taylor Ward. He just had over 100 RBIs. So you put him right behind Vinny Pasquantino and Salvador Perez. I feel pretty good about that outfield, and I feel pretty good about that lineup. Still, the only sweetener I feel you would have with that is the Angels aren't going to be competing. If they move one of those players, they definitely aren't competing, even if you would be sending them one of your starting rotation guys. So the Angels, keep an open mind. We'll just see where they're at in the winter meetings. A third team that I thought would be kind of interesting and maybe the best option because you wouldn't have to worry about them unless you saw them in the World Series, which that's putting the cart way ahead of the horse here. It's the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks had a bottom 10 rotation or a bottom 10 pitching staff in all of baseball. They dealt with a lot of injury, and Zach Gallen wasn't as good this year. At least I remember at the beginning of the year, he wasn't as sharp. They ran into a depth problem, and they've got a couple of guys that I feel would make a ton of sense for the Royals. Not Perdomo. Perdomo coming off a career year. He was the most valuable player for Arizona. I don't see them moving him at 25 years old. Same goes for Corbin Carroll. Alec Thomas is not worth it to trade away a Noah Cameron or a Chris Bubich. A couple of the guys that are depth pieces, if you were to get multiple players off their bench, again, that's not doing it for me because you need that middle of the order bat. One of the names that was brought up by our listeners, and I thought it was a good name. I'm not sure yet what the price tag would really be on a player like him, but it's Ketel Marte. Ketel Marte is still under contract for another 5 years, I believe. He's making a good chunk of money, but there were the rumblings at the end of the year that maybe Arizona would be looking into moving him. He's a switch hitter. He can play around a little bit, and he's 31. Arizona has always viewed him as a huge part of their team, hence why they gave him the large contract. But I would be curious if, the Royals had a starting pitcher and maybe a prospect thrown in, and you eat a chunk of that salary if it could get it done. Because I believe Ketel Marte, of the names I just mentioned, could probably do the most for your lineup. Could be the biggest acquisition you would have. It is a very un-Royal-like move to take on somebody with a bunch of years left on the contract. But I really feel that we need to be open to anything that J.J. Picollo and company might do. And that's why with Arizona, a team that needs pitching, everybody needs pitching really is the theme of this segment and theme of the offseason. You're never going to have a team that turns their nose up at at an available starting pitcher, especially one with multiple years of control. But look at the bottom 10 pitching staffs in baseball. Baltimore's another one. I'm not sure they have a guy that you'd really want anymore that would make a ton of sense for the Royals, especially outfielders. You've got the Minnesota Twins, but that's trading in division. I don't really see that happening. But some of these other teams, Arizona, who's in the National League, they might be more open to trading a longtime player to an American League team that's looking to upgrade their lineup, and they get starting pitching depth with multiple years of control for cheap. These are all the things we need to be factoring in here. But those three teams I keep going back to over and over again as a good destination, as a good partner to negotiate with coming up here in about a month and a half. And if deals start to progress a little bit, I'd be fascinated to know what's being talked about, who is being offered in these deals. But as I said in the first segment, I'm going to say it again. You want to get any of those bats I just mentioned, it can't happen unless you're willing to move a Noah Cameron or a Chris Bubich. Do you think any of those players would be a good fit for the Royals? Let us know in the YouTube comments below. To wrap up our show, I want to talk about the Royals outfield because we spend so much time about the corner outfield. I want to talk about center field. Kyle Isbel. Is he good enough to be their starting center fielder again in 2026? I'll give you my thoughts next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Want to tell you about the title sponsor today in FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. For my pick, I'm going to go with the money line for the Baltimore Ravens against the Miami Dolphins, and I will take the over on rushing yards for Derrick Henry. Our final segment is going to involve the outfield, and specifically one outfielder, and Kyle Isbel. We've always known the type of hitter that Kyle Isbel can be. And for as long as I've been doing this podcast, you have heard me discuss Kyle Isbel and say the same phrase over and over again. If he is a league average bat, he can be just fine because he's so good defensively. I've gone back to that countless times, and I still believe that to be the case. Who Kyle Isbel is as a hitter is not going to change. But for a chunk of last season, you pretty much got that. You got a well above average defender, a gold glove center fielder, and somebody that until a ghastly end to the season was hitting around 270. He's not going to walk much. He's not going to see a bunch of pitches, but he's a fine 9-hole hitter. And so the question becomes, is that good enough from such a high value position? I've had a few listeners and commenters ask me that before. What do you mean by high value position, right? When you talk about second base, you say it's not as high value of position. Right field's not a high value position, but shortstop, center field, catcher, those are all very high value positions. And what I'm getting at is you have to have good defenders there. I know for the Royals behind the plate, they haven't gotten that the last couple of years from Salvador Perez. But, when you hit 30 bombs and driving over 100, you can make up for it a little bit. But with how a lot of teams are constructed, they look at those three positions and say, I want to have a very good player there. A bare minimum, I got to have an elite defender there. The Royals have that at short. They have that in center. And who knows, maybe in the future, Carter Jensen becomes that elite level defender that can also swing the bat a little bit. So the Royals have half of the problem solved in center field. But the bat, I'm not sure is ever going to get there. What he finished with last season, which was around 255, got on base around 305 to 310, didn't hit for much power. He's a singles hitter. He is the traditional 9-hole hitter. But if you could upgrade there, if you could get your center fielder of the future, number one, what would it take? Would it be one of the guys that we've been discussing all episode long? Or would it take a couple of prospects? Or would it take a 2 to 3 year deal to someone like Trent Grisham? And are the Royals okay with trading out that defense for a better bat? You look at the advanced metrics, the advanced numbers on Trent Grisham, he's not that great of a defender anymore. He's far better at the plate than Kyle Isbel. You're adding 30-plus home runs to center field, and he looks smooth playing that position. But some of those outs above average, the range that Kyle Isbel has, it helps out this pitching staff, which is why I believe he's been the starter the last handful of years. The Royals like to tailor to their pitching staff, whether it be starters or bullpen guys. They value that defense late in games. But that's where I go back to, if you get to the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning and you got a 1 to 3 run lead, you can make that defensive switch. Nobody is saying that you got to get rid of Kyle Isbel. Nobody's saying that at all. But at this stage of his career, I feel that he is really settled in nicely to being a 4th outfielder. And even without really knowing it that much, even without seeing it as much as maybe we would like to, he was a platoon player last year. And the Royals really didn't have that equal in center field to him. Tyler Tolbert wasn't that great defensively in center field. Mike Yastrzemski wasn't that great defensively in center field. He's also not a platoon guy for Isbel because they're both lefties. You had Dairon Blanco out there a little bit. He doesn't give you the defensive abilities of Kyle Isbel, but he rarely faced lefties if they were starting on the mound. And you just see more righties throughout the year than lefties. So if Kyle Isbel is the opening day center fielder, you're going to see him out there for 110-plus games next year. It's just how the odds work in baseball. But if you are going to run it with a platoon player in center field, what could you be looking to pair him with? Is it Harrison Bader, or does Harrison Bader want to be an everyday center fielder? And if Harrison Bader, coming off the year he had last year, says, I want a 2-year deal worth, give or take $28 million. That's the contract I want. Are you willing to pay that? That's certainly affordable for the Royals. But if you get that defense from Kyle Isbel and you keep hanging on to the idea of hit 260 for us in the 9-hole and you are a good center fielder, we're going to take that every single year until we draft and develop a center fielder. Maybe that's Sean Gamble. Maybe that's Carson Rogefort. Or maybe you wait till the free agent market looks a little bit more enticing on center fielders. Or through the trade route. If you really like a center fielder, maybe that's what makes sense there. Because I've said before, Mike Yastrzemski I'm leaning toward they're going to give him another contract, that there would be interest for him to be a starting outfielder at one of the corner spots. And if you have Yastrzemski and maybe left field, because I know he played there at the last half of the season, if you have a platoon with Yastrzemski and somebody in left field, and you have Jack Caglione in right field, maybe the player you look to trade for is a center fielder. I go back for Boston, the team we discussed in the second segment tonight. Jarren Duran and Ceddanne Rafaela can both play center field, right? Wilyer Abreu, not so much. He's an elite right fielder with the arm that he has, but the other two, they can play center. Maybe that's how they would go about upgrading it. But I would love to know, going into the GM meetings and then the winter meetings, if they are penciling in Kyle Isbel as a starting center fielder for this team in 2026. And if that is the case, I would love to know how they go about boosting it. And I believe the only way you can boost it, if Kyle Isbel is the opening day center fielder when the team takes the field in Atlanta, is if they have a good right-handed bat to play off of him. And as I've said before, the only guy that makes a ton of sense that would mirror Kyle Isbel but maybe give you better offensive numbers is Harrison Bader. But Bader would know this too, that if Kyle Isbel is going to start against righties and I get to start against lefties, I'm not even playing more than maybe twice a week. You see far too many righties throughout the season that Harrison Bader would go, I am only going to sign somewhere where I can play every single day. But again, it's what the Royals believe Kyle Isbel can still be, or if they're content with what he gave last year. Now, there's two reasons to go about it. Hey, he hit 250 for you last year, Gold Glove defense. A lot of teams would like that from their center fielder. Or there's the other side of, we feel that he can still be a 270 hitter. We love the defense. If he's a 270 hitter, he can be a 3-WAR player in center field, which would make him one of the more valuable center fielders out there, certainly in the American League. But they've got plenty of time to figure that out, whether it be through discussions of upgrading at that position, negotiating with other outfielders in free agency. We will know soon enough if the Royals want Kyle Isbel to be their starting center fielder on opening day in 2026. Do you believe he'll be? Let us know in the YouTube comments below. That'll do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every day. For your second, find the all-night Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, until a World Series champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale and find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Tomorrow we'll be bringing you another episode, probably highlighting another trade target. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.